So Michael Jordan is suing NASCAR on behalf of the NASCAR team that he co-owns 2311 Racing. Man, you talk about the unlikely meeting of two of the things that I was obsessed with the most in the 90s growing up as a child. Um, Growing up, from as early as I can remember, I've been obsessed with NASCAR. This obsession ended around 2013 before I turned 30, but um, to the point where I don't really watch it now. But that's another story for another day. I could make many, many videos on NASCAR, what happened to it, and all that. But just a little brief overview to know why this is such an interesting story to me. Dad was a big Dale Earnhardt fan. And like I said, I always liked to sit next to him on the couch and watch TV with him. On Sundays, he'd watch the NASCAR races and he'd pull for Dale. And as a result, I became a huge Dale Earnhardt fan. I got his autograph in early 1990 at a Chevrolet dealership in Winston-Salem, where I grew up. And that began an obsession. He was, 1990, I was 6, and, this is the time when superheroes were a big deal, even kind of like they are now. This is before all the Marvel stuff came out. The Batman movie, the first Tim Burton Batman movie had come out. Ghostbusters had come out. The Superman movies had come out about 10 years early, but they're still played on Cinemax and HBO all the time. But there's no superhero cooler than the Intimidator, and he was real. He was from my home state. Getting to see him race was such an honor and such a thrill. Um, you know, I was it was an obsession. I pulled for him so hard for all the '90s, and was looking forward to pulling for him, and hopefully into my adulthood. Unfortunately, when I was 17, right before I turned 17 in 2001, he died in that year's Daytona 500 in the last lap. That's another story for another day. I could probably make a 20-minute video just on that, but it was tough. NASCAR was just booming in popularity throughout the 90s, just surging forward. They had so much momentum, and they actually kept the momentum going after we lost Dale. Even after he died, NASCAR's ratings and attendance continued to climb, and it peaked in the 2005s and the 2006 seasons. The season finale in 2005, I think 19 million people tuned in at one point, and then the 2006 Daytona 500, which was the first race of the season. Every year, the Daytona 500, I think it drew 19.5 million, which is the most watched NASCAR race ever. And from that point forward, it's just been a decline unlike anything you can imagine. So many bad decisions have been made, and now they're drawing about 3 million viewers per race, anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 million viewers per race now, which sounds good. It's a respectable number, but you have to consider with NASCAR, it's one race a week for the Cup Series at least. So there's no oversaturation issues as far as it being 3 or 4 times a week. They don't have the same problem that like baseball and basketball have with 82 to 162 games a season respectively. And also every single driver is at the same race. Imagine if every single NFL team played in the same stadium at the same place at the same time every Sunday. What kind of ratings that would draw? Uh, they could probably have a billion viewer telecast easy. So NASCAR should be doing a lot better. The attendance, they used to be, for the longest time, they could not build enough seats. Every seat, no matter where they built, would be filled. Grew up in North Carolina, went to a lot of races at North Wilkesboro before they shut it down, and that's another video I could make. Went to Charlotte a lot. In Charlotte, they just kept building and kept building and kept building grandstands. And every single time we went back to the race, me and Dad, we'd go to a race and there'd be a whole new grandstand built, and it'd be filled. They literally could not build enough, and now they're having to tear them down. And what little they do have, it's usually half full, if that. It's been a pretty bad decline. A lot of people say NASCAR died when Dale died. That's not completely true. In fact, that's not really even close to true. As much as I love Dale, NASCAR's demise was they were actually sealing their fate as they were growing, which is kind of a fascinating story in and of itself. Like I said, that's some videos I can make and I hope to make in the future, figuring out what the heck happened to NASCAR. It's crazy. There were a lot of short-sighted business decisions in order to try to get that quick buck, that quick viewer, and just leaving behind their roots and just ignoring and abandoning their roots. With decisions beginning in the '90s as they were on this tremendous surge, is what would eventually seal their fate through the end of the 2010s and the beginning of the 2010s. By the year 2013, NASCAR was already a shell of its former self, and now it's a shell of its former self. I pretty much quit paying attention after 2013. Number of rules changes, format championship changes, and some more stuff I can get into really turned me off. The drivers really turned me off, and one driver in particular, Brad Keselowski, whom I had become particularly attached to, snubbed me for an autograph, which is funny. My obsession with NASCAR began with an autograph and ended with a snubbed autograph, so go figure with that one. That's pretty funny, but pretty ironic, I should say. I wasn't laughing at the time, but it freed me up. I mean, now I can't hardly tell you who's raced. I actually had to do some research for this video to see what's going on nowadays, and that's what brings us to Michael Jordan. He's a co-owner of 2011 Racing, and I mean, what do I need to say about the GOAT? If you were alive in the 90s and you watched sports like I did, you knew about Michael Jordan, and unless you were a hardcore dyed-in-the-wool fan of another team, you loved Michael Jordan. You loved watching Michael Jordan. You loved watching him and the Bulls win those championships. I remember that. I remember every single one of them. I remember them quite vividly. And obviously the fact that he went to my favorite college, the University of North Carolina. He was a North Carolina Tar Heel. Made it even better. I was born in March of 1984, which is, I believe, the same month that he played his last game as a Tar Heel. So I didn't get to watch him play live at the time, but still, knowing that he was that just added icing to the cake for me. He was such a fierce competitor, so much fun to watch. Those memories are etched. Oftentimes, when you're a kid and you watch things, you go back and you watch the broadcast or the replay of it from when it happened on YouTube or something, and it's a lot different than you remembered. Time, more memories, and a lot of stuff, makes it to where the way you remember it is not the way it went down. But I'll never forget the 1993 finals, Game 6, when the Bulls won and clinched it in Phoenix against the Phoenix Suns. They were down by 2. John Paxson hit an amazingly clutch three-pointer. Michael Jordan drove the floor on the other side and passed it to the inside, and everybody was chasing him and Scotty and Horace, and they kicked it out to wide-open John Paxson, who drained it. And I still, to this day, remembered Marv Albert on the call saying, "Paxson for the 3, yes!" And however he did it, I probably butchered it, but and I went and watched the replay on YouTube, kind of expecting it to be, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago that I actually watched the original broadcast, expecting it to be quite a bit different than I remembered, but it was exactly how I did. I remembered it. It was pretty. That's pretty rare. It just shows you how ingrained in my psyche Michael Jordan is. So, how did these two wind up together? We actually have to fast forward to 2020. Cursed year indeed. He started a NASCAR team with a driver by the name of Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin is perfectly symbolic of NASCAR's collapse. He ran his first few Cup races in 2005 and ran his first full season in 2006. Won 2 races, finished top 5 in points, won Rookie of the Year. Looked to be a very likable person. Looked like he'd be a future person that fans could really get behind. And he's still racing. He's still winning races. But he has been one of the biggest disappointments from a personality standpoint. He is about as unlikable as it gets. Runs his mouth a lot, very un-Jordan-esque. He's not clutch. He's not won a championship yet. He's not even would have never won one under the old system of when they tallied the points up all season. Another story for another day, but it's kind of a surprising move, very un-Jordan-like. I think they met in the golf course, and I don't know. Michael Jordan's post-playing career has been a little all over the place, but hey, he's in NASCAR, and he's doing something really good right now that I applaud personally. But yeah, they started a team. They started a team for Bubba Wallace. 2020, as I'm sure you remember, is the year of the civil social causes, social movements, all the social justice stuff that went nowhere and ultimately panned out into nothing and hurt everybody involved way more than it helped anybody. Bubba is half black. The only non-white driver outside of, I think, Daniel Suarez, who's Hispanic in the Cup. NASCAR has been notoriously lily white throughout its entire 75-year history. They had Wendell Scott drive for them for a while, but he was driving his own equipment. This is back when independents would drive old junk equipment, and he wasn't able to do much. He did win a race, which of course they couldn't officially say that he won because this is in Jacksonville, Florida in the 60s, and there would have been a race riot. The South's come a long, long ways, and I'm very proud of us. But it was overall, it's just a sport that just keeps attracting more and more and more white people. And it's not a bad thing. It's not like we've been It's not like we've been excluding them outside of at least once the '70s arrived. Once the South kind of realized the Civil War had ended and it's not the 1860s anymore. It's been a very good place, and but for some reason, it's just never attracted minorities, and that's okay as long as we're not actively keeping them away, which we're not. But we do have Bubba Wallace. He's, like I said, half black. Grew up in Alabama. His real name's Daryl, and he goes by the name Bubba. And you'd think that would endear him. And he seemed to be a very, very endearing person. He's somebody that I cheered for when he drove for Richard Petty, other 7-time champion, along with Dale Earnhardt and Jimmy Johnson. But very, very mentally fragile. He's might be the most un-Jordan-esque athlete in any sport. Very, very mentally weak. He lets failures get to him and eat him alive. Whereas Michael Jordan took every failure personally and used it to fuel him for future success. Bubba does quite the opposite. Every failure for him fuels his even more future failures. But 23XI has been a pretty good success his first 4 years. His first year, it's 2021, was just Bubba. They won his first race. It was a rain shortened race at Talladega, plate race. And the next year, he actually won a legitimate race at Kansas. The race went the full distance, and he just flat out beat everybody. That was his last win. That's the second and last win. He hasn't won at all in the last 3 seasons, or 2 seasons, or whatever it is. But in 2022, they also started a second team at 23XI Racing, the 45 team. And Michael's 2 numbers from his career. And Kurt Busch drove it initially, won a race. He's won everywhere he's been. Got a concussion in the very unsafe Generation 7 NASCAR race car, which is another video I could make. And since then, they've gotten Tyler Reddick, who has won, I think, 5 races. He's done a very good job. He's shown a lot of speed. They actually won the regular season championship, which is hard to explain. Before their playoff format starts, he had the most points of anybody in the first 26 races of the 36 race schedule, and they give him a trophy now for that. So, again, that's another video. But people always, again, like I talked about earlier, people want to say what killed NASCAR. People say it died when Dale died. That's kind of more coincidental than anything. Truth is, NASCAR died because its leadership structure would not adapt to its growth. As NASCAR got bigger and bigger, it would not let go of its privately owned France family iron fist rule. NASCAR was founded 1940s by Big Bill France, Bill France Sr. Back then he did what he had to do. He owned it, and he ran everything, and he ran it with an iron fist. He didn't care who you were. If you came across him and tried to take power away from him, he would either ban you for life, like he did the very popular driver Curtis Turner at the time in the 60s, or Richard Petty, who was very popular in the 60s, when they decided to outlaw the Hemi engine that he was running his Dodges at the time. They said, well, they're going to boycott NASCAR. And they said, well, go ahead. He let them walk. So they've never been above shooting themselves in the foot to avoid giving up any power to anybody. But that worked at first. That worked when they were a smaller organization trying to gain traction. In the 70s, his son, Bill France Jr., took over. He's generally credited as being the guy that really, really built NASCAR up into the sky. And he did. He did a very, very good job. He, like his father, ruled the sport with an iron fist. Nobody was taking any power away from him. He had the final say, and that was that. And it worked up to a point. Once the 90s arrived, NASCAR just had incredible momentum. They'd been building it throughout the 70s, which led to the infamous 1979 Daytona 500, where they had their first nationally televised flag-to-flag race. Crazy finish. You could probably make a video about that one too. But as they gained popularity throughout the 90s, that's when he really needed to give up some control to other people and other investors to really help grow the sport properly. Instead, the whole France family, they just decided they were going to keep control of it and not give it away at all. And that just led to them not having anybody to say, hey, this idea is dumb. The original chase for the championship, doing away with the season-long championship format. They wanted to do it, so they did it. There's no pushback or anything. They wanted to shut down North Wilkesboro. They did it. No pushback. They wanted to take races away from Rockingham and Darlington and all these, traditional places, or the traditional racetracks that built the sport up. They took Labor Day away from Darlington, which is one of the dumbest things ever. They struggled with that forever. By the time they finally gave Labor Day weekend back to Darlington in the Southern 500, it's too late. A lot of us had tuned out. I know I haven't really sat down and just watched a NASCAR race since one of the Southern 500s probably 2 or 3 years ago. Can't remember who won. But that's where NASCAR is at. But finally, somebody has stepped up to the plate and has taken NASCAR to court for their an antitrust lawsuit for the way they just monopolize everything and the way that they're hurting the sport. And that person's Michael Jordan, and I commend him for that. Somebody needs to do it. Him and Front Row Motorsports combined are doing it. The sports just is in a very, very bad place. I mean, owners are bailing all over the place. Nobody's making money. I mean, gosh, Stewart-Haas Racing is going to close down this into this season. They started in 2009 when Tony Stewart was basically given half of Haas Racing, and they named it Stewart-Haas. They've won championships, one with Tony, one with Kevin Harvick, won a Daytona 500. They've just won a lot of races, showed a ton of respectability. Now they're saying, you can tell they shut it down because they don't want to do it anymore. Tony's happy just being drag racing. He doesn't want to be part of the financial losses anymore. Gene Haas, the billionaire, doesn't want to be part of the financial losses anymore. Even Hendrick Motorsports, Jeff Gordon, who obviously won a lot of races in championships with Hendrick Motorsports, probably the most successful driver win-wise. I know Jimmy Johnson has more championships, but he's probably the face of Hendrick Motorsports and now has an executive role with them. And even he said they've not turned a profit in years. The cost to run the teams versus what NASCAR is willing to pay out, they're not making money. They're having to rely on Rick Hendrick's other, massive billion-dollar basically business empire to continue. And that's not good. That's not good. When an organization like them can't make a profit in NASCAR, who can? At least who can make a profit while being able to race for victories and championships. It's just, like I said, not a good time. The racing's been bad for a long, long time. When they started going to the aero packages of the mid-90s with the nose glued to the racetrack and the guy behind the other guy couldn't pass because they were in dirty air, that was a big part. And the racetracks they built and the places they went and the places they left behind, all because the France family can go unchecked. Brian France took it over, and that guy's about one of the dumbest people on the face of the earth. Just crazy, but he had to give up control after getting busted for a DUI and with cocaine and Percocets, I think it was, or cocaine and Xanax in his car. He was completely absentee. We thought, okay, good, now NASCAR is going to finally get to go back to where it was, but the France family kept it. Jim France, who I think's Bill France's brother, owns it, and all the other members of the France family run it, and they're just not willing to go control. They have charters, which I guess is kind of like a franchise, but they give out X number of charters, which means you're guaranteed in every race. You have to pay for them. And according to 2311 Racing, it's not worth it. That's not worth it, and there's no real recourse otherwise, and they're just out there losing money. And they've brought this lawsuit to light, and if nothing else, I just hope it'll really shine a light on what's wrong with NASCAR. And it's pretty awesome that Michael Jordan's the one to do it. It's good to see that competitor in him come out again. We haven't really had a chance to see it since he played with the Bulls. Just his I'm going for it and I'm going to win. His time as an executive and an owner for my Charlotte Hornets and the Washington Wizards before that have unfortunately not been good at all. He's kind of handcuffed by a small market and proceeded to not really try. I don't want to say he didn't try, but I mean he just never made any good decisions. I'm glad to see that though. He was cutthroat, and I hope he takes that cutthroat attitude towards this. Speaking of that Paxson 3-pointer that I talked about earlier that I remember so well, I remember the interview afterwards. They used to go to the locker room and they'd be spraying champagne at each other, and Bob Costas would try to interview people while they're getting champagne poured all over them and they're holding the trophies. So much more organic than what they do now with them all standing on the stage and everything's all planned out and all that. But he was trying to show Mike. He's like, "What were you thinking during this shot, during this play with John Paxson?" Mike was like, "Oh, I knew Paxson was going to hit that shot. I knew he was going to hit it." And all of us that knew what a cutthroat competitor Michael Jordan was, we knew when that shot went up, he was thinking to himself, "Pax, if you miss this shot, Pax, I let them agreed to a play where I wasn't making the big shot. If you miss this, Pax, listen, your ass is about to be missing. You know who's going to find you? Some old man fishing." Look, I don't know much about rap, but even I know that lyric. I love it. And I'm 100% positive DMX put that line in there as an homage, paying homage to the GOAT, Michael Jordan, for what we all could read. We could all read his mind at that moment, what he was really thinking when John made that shot. And luckily he made it. But we all know that's what he was thinking, and that's why DMX put that in that line in the song. So I'm not a rap aficionado, but that's all I could think about. But yeah, I'm super glad that Michael Jordan's doing this. I just hope somebody can break this France family monopoly. It's well past time. It was time in the '90s for them to start giving up some control and just to let the sport grow, just let the sport do what it can do while still servicing those of us that really built the sport with our time and our money and our obsession. So hopefully, if nothing else, it'll expose the France family, and sponsors will say, okay, we're not sponsoring NASCAR until a better structure comes into place and they can finally be free of the France family. Would another structure work? Probably not, but I mean, why are we just going to go down with the ship the same way it's been going downhill for the last 30 years? So even when it was going uphill, it's actually going downhill now when you look back at it. So go Michael again. Sink that three, buddy. sink that game-winning buzzer again. This time you don't have to pass it to Paxson. Sink it. So thank you guys. Thanks for watching these videos, and I'll talk to you soon.